There we are. We're live. Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday, August 25th, and this is the second installment of USENIX's Lisa Conversations. I'm Lee Damon, Senior Computing Specialist, try saying that 3 times fast, for the University of Washington. Tom isn't able to join us this month, so I'm ably assisted by the gorgeous and talented David Blank-Edelman.
Hey, thanks for having me on. So I'm David Blank-Edelman, the technical evangelist at Apcera, and I'm glad to be here. I don't think I can be Tom, but I'll do my best. So each month, Lisa Conversations brings you a speaker from a past USENIX Lisa and related conferences to follow up on their presentation.
And just a reminder, if you're watching us live, please do feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A section. You may need to hit the little 3x3 grid in the upper right corner to find it. In this episode, we'll be talking with Ben Rockwood of Chef, previously with Joyent. Ben gave a talk at Lisa 2014 entitled, I am sysadmin, and so can you. Ben, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. It's going to be a fun conversation, I'm sure. So we always open with a set of questions, so we'll just jump right into that if you're ready.
Sure, let's do it.
So I'm going to combine the first 2 questions, actually, because, well, yes, major changes, obviously. What do you do now at Chef? And tell us how your position has changed since the presentation.
Considerably. You know, the funny thing is, actually, when I gave the presentation, technically I was unemployed. I had left Joyent the Friday before Lisa, came to Seattle for the event, and then was unemployed that week. That was my week off in between, and then Monday morning I actually started at Chef, also in Seattle. So, and now I live in Seattle, so it was kind of an interesting sort of thing to arise. Before, you know, I started early at Joyent when we got started way back in the day, when 2 companies, TextDrive and Joyent, one was a community hippie hosting company in TextDrive, and the other was a Ruby kind of a dev shop, and Joyent merged and decided to start building kind of the industrial, kind of the utility computing idea of the early 2000s that never really had panned out. We started off calling it a grid, and they decided they were going to build it all in Solaris, and so they needed a Solaris expert, so they reached out to me early on, and I kind of came on as the director of operations and started to build the platform, and it was a fun ride. Grid became cloud, and I got to kind of see it all from the very beginning. It was a cool gig, and then what I've done now. Now that I've left Joyent, I've come over to Chef. I'm running operations, IT, and an internal development team. So kind of ended up doing the management thing that I never thought I would do, but it's kind of fun. It's different.
How much? I should mention that I was a TextDrive customer once upon a time, hosted out in Guilford. If that's going to bring you a few flashbacks.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So my question for you is, how much actual typing do you get to do these days? So now that you're doing the managerial stuff, like how much do you actually get to do the administrating of the systems? Or is it like administering systems through people's?
Not as much as I'd like. You know, I found that one of the big differences, and I think a lot of people probably can understand this, but it's been a while for me since I was at Joyent for 8 years. Is there's a big difference between having built something from inception all the way through multiple iterations, where you are the one person who knows every nut, every bolt, you know where the cracks are, you know everything about that infrastructure, and so you can enter into any conversation and be authoritative because you built it, and then you manage the teams who do it. So you kind of have the sort of, not only are you the boss, but you're also sort of the father figure, because they're all now, they came into your kind of playground, and so it's kind of this interesting sort of thing. Now I'm coming into something that was built, you know, 5 years prior and developed by a whole different group of people. And coming in, it is a little different, and it is a little intimidating. There's nothing that, you know, can't be figured out, but it's when you have to ask questions like, you know, do I really have to ask which is connected to which and all this? Yeah, I do. But yeah, I keep my hands in it as much as I can, and now that I've been here almost 8 months, a little over 8 months, Now I have my ways around, but the first couple of months was just very bizarre as I was finding my way around.
Is it hard being the boss when you don't yet quite know how things work?
Yes and no. I mean, it's unsettling because when you ask a question and don't get an answer you don't really like, you can't just log into the system and go check, right? You have to like first ask like, where's the system? Which of course is then like, why do I have to ask you where the system is? But the positive thing about that from a managerial sense is it's a good kind of solid end-to-end head check, right? It's like I have to ask all the questions. And when I don't get answers, instead of just getting upset or just going around them, I have to kind of write it down like, okay, this is a thing we need to do. Like, you should know the answer to that, and if you don't, that's endemic of a problem. So I use it to my advantage.
So one last question along these lines, having recently moved jobs as well, what is the best cartographic kind of question you can ask that would give you like the lay of the land? Like as a new boss walking in, what sort of thing do you think would be that you'd recommend somebody ask if they wanted to get a real understanding of like how things are, where they live, that sort of stuff? Is there a good project, or if even that's a question, is there a good project you could do?
The best thing you can do is sit everyone down in a conference room and point to a whiteboard. And don't say anything, just point to the whiteboard. And when they look at you confused, be like, fill that. Just completely fill it and explain it to me. And you'd be amazed how hard it is for people to do that. And then you ask them questions, and then they'll kick back on you like, well, duh, we know where everything is. I'm like, great, you do. Put it on that whiteboard. Well, and you find holes real quick.
That sounds awesome.
So getting back to the warm-up questions, what was the reaction to your presentation? And you gave this sysadmin, you can to talk, and you're up there for, what was it, about 45 minutes with Q&A? Yeah. What was the reaction?
It was sort of all over the place. Funny enough, kind of, after I gave it, a bunch of people come up to the front and say, nice talk, and give me a hard time about this or that or the other thing. The comment that stuck with me most was, as I was leaving the room, there was a gentleman there in a suit, full suit, so not terribly usual for our crowd, and he looked me in the eye with these just warm, friendly eyes and put his hand out and shook my hand, and he said, thank you so much. You mentioned ZOS and IBM mainframes, and that if you're still running mainframes, that's okay. And that meant a lot to me because I'm in a shop where we still have a big IBM investment. We have a lot of mainframes, and it's really hard, and I feel very excluded. So thank you so much for kind of giving that shout out, and that was really nice. That I really liked. So I felt like if nothing else, I did one thing right.
Well, that is excellent. I'm glad you did that. Actually, I don't remember you mentioning that. Was that in the Q&A section, which didn't get onto the video?
No. It was right in the middle of it. The point I was trying to make. I mean, generally, the whole point of the talk was it was sort of a rebut to the haters, right? That all of us are in different situations, and they're not all the same. And so anytime somebody wants to say everyone should do this, or this is the right way, or if you do it that way, you're old and you're busted, it's really unfair. It's incredibly unfair because most of us as system administrators, like, we've worked with what we had, what we were given. We didn't make the fundamental technology choices usually. And if we did, we made them to a certain extent, right? But if you're in Ohio, working for a widget company and you're still rocking AS400s, then like that's what you've got. Like, why should we diss on you because of the technology decision made by your employer, and say that you're somehow less of an administrator because you still work there? Like, that's the guy we should be patting on the back and saying, thanks for not giving up. Thanks for sticking with it and taking care of your customers, taking care of your users, taking care of your company. That's what we all should be doing. So it was kind of a, hate the haters kind of talk in general. And it was a fun talk to give for that reason. I just wanted to be like extremely kind of encouraging to everybody.
Do you have anything you want to add or say since that presentation that's along those same lines?
No, I think I covered most of the bases. Hopefully that the takeaway was that it was a talk of inclusion. And so I think the only thing I would want to maybe correct is if there was anybody who listened to that talk and felt in any way discouraged because of it, then like I totally deserved you, and that I would feel really bad about.
So I remember one of the things in your talk was a section in which you were saying, here are some cool technologies or tools that have made my life better recently that I really enjoy, that you should all go check out. Do you remember anyone's currently along those lines, just to add to it, that you can think of where you're like, oh, yeah, now I'm really getting into this?
That I would add to the list?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to say this in what sounds like a bragging way, but I was really fortunate, and one of the reasons I kind of liked doing that list, number one, everyone loves a tool list. Everyone always loves a tool list. But
yeah.
I also, in my last couple of months there at Joyent, I was really kind of focused on R&D, in a sense. And so I was spending a lot of time in a lot of things that hadn't quite come to fruition. So I was very deep and very steeped in Docker and kind of like tired of it already. So I got into that, thankfully, like right at the beginning, just because I was a cloud provider and we kind of knew what was coming and we're looking at what people were going to want in our cloud. Mesos is something that I spent a ton of time in just prior to giving the talk, so I put Mesos in there and stuff like that. So I think a lot of those are still panning out, and there's not much that's burst onto the scene since. There might have been a couple of things I excluded from the talk because I was trying to give kind of a general lay of the land. There are some tech that I'm digging, like Riemann. I'm doing a lot with Riemann right now in monitoring.
So Riemann, the thing that does log stream processing?
Yeah, it's just like Logstash for metrics. I spent some time playing with Heka, which is a similar sort of tool from Mozilla, but I'm using Riemann. Trying to think. But these days, honestly, I spend most of my time over the last couple of years because of DevOps and whatnot. I spend more time in business books and business theory than I do in tools. So,
do you want to just off the top of your head name one or two books that you think people should immediately seek out, or at least the one you're reading now that you kind of like?
I just finished 2 last night. The one. If there's one book you should read out of the business world that will save you a lot of pain and help explain a lot of the DevOps stuff at a very fundamental level that will kind of get you ahead of the game, the fifth discipline, which was written in the early 90s. Yeah, Peter Senge. He didn't necessarily invent all this stuff, but what he did is he collapsed about 50 years worth of MIT systems thinking and stuff that was in Lean and whatnot into like one book. So that's, everyone tells you to read The Goal. The Goal's great, you should read The Goal, but Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, will get you a long way really quickly. So, yeah, there's a ton of other ones, but I won't digress.
Okay. I just want to remind people that if you are interested in asking our esteemed guest questions, please use the question and answer tool. It can be found on the left. If you need to, you may have to push the 3x3 thingy to go find it, because sometimes it's buried.
And in fact, we have a question that's come in. First question from Rachel McGregor Rawlings is, I'm taking procedures out of our wiki and turning them into Ansible playbooks and putting those in our GitLab repo. Do you think there should be intermediate steps? Anyone?
She has something in mind that she's smarter than we are. She has something in mind I'm not thinking of.
You think it's a loaded question?
Well, it just the question implies that she's thinking there's something else she should be doing, but she's not quite confident about it.
Is there something having to do with structure, so you can find it again, or metadata around it? So you know
I would assume that would be in the playbook, and in your playbook, I hope would be in Git, right? So you should be tracking change.
Right.
No, I mean, it sounds sensible. In general, I mean, the rule with any of that, it's almost any sort of does it make sense question is does it make sense for your environment? Does it make sense for the people in your environment, the people in your team, what you're trying to do? And you know, one of the most important pieces of kind of the whole DevOps thing that I'm a big fan of is continuous improvement, right? Like, do it, just do it that way, and then kind of see where it goes. If you notice over the course of a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you're like, I don't really like this part, tweak it. You know, it's also why it's good to, you know, write down whatever path you want to use, write that down as a standard procedure, so that when you do want to tweak it, you're rationally tweaking it. You're not just changing what you're doing without being aware of it. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll constantly change something over time, but then when you look backwards on it, you'll think you always did it that way, when in fact you were changing it, improving it all the time.
Can I pop you up one level of the stack for a meta question based on what we were just talking about?
Sure.
So we sound an awful lot when we say this, and we talk about checking things into our GitHub, like devs, you know, who can code, and I suspect everybody on this Hangout can. Do you think it's important or necessary to know how to code to be a sysadmin now? And at sort of what level, I guess I'd ask that question.
You know, I'm gonna call bullshit. I'm gonna push back on this one, particularly because
so the answer is no, is what you're saying?
No, I think it's a false question.
Oh, okay.
I think a lot of times we think that's a valid question. I think it's actually a pretty bullshit question. And not you, David, or anyone.
Yeah, no, I know, totally. I want to hear what you're going.
The point is, like, we all know how to write programs. We all do, right? If you know how to write a shell script, if you know how to put one command into a shell script, you know how to program, right? In the most basic definition thereof.
That's about my level of programming.
And you know, but the thing is we like to downplay it. Here's one thing I found as a manager is I'm really big on personal development, career development, and really getting into everybody who works for me, kind of where they're at, where they want to go, what their aspirations are, what they want to learn. And every single one of them is like, I want to be a better programmer. I want to be a better programmer. I want to be a better programmer. And some of them are really, really good. And they're like, and I want to be a better programmer. And I suddenly sort of noticed that it doesn't matter if you're the kind of weakest possible programmer, meaning that you just know a little shell, or you're a great programmer, you never have arrived, because it's like mathematics. There's no point at which you're like, I understand math. I know it. Like, no one would ever do that. No matter how many Nobel Prizes you have, you always want to get better at math. There's always something more to learn. And so programming is just, it's not one of those things that there's an end. There's no point where you can check a box, ever. And so I think I'm just sort of rejecting that question in general. Should you endeavor to improve your programming skills? Yes, if it serves your job, right? I actually had a couple of people in my IT team who really wanted to improve their Ruby. And I looked at their workload and everything that they were doing. I'm like, when do you actually need to write Ruby? And they're like, well, never. But you know, it seems like something we should do. And I'm like, no, I'm taking it off your list. Don't waste any time learning Ruby, because all you're going to do is bolster yourself up so that somebody else can look at you and be like, oh boy, you know some Ruby. But it won't improve your day-to-day life at all. It'll just make you a little more confident. So, you know, we all need to focus on the task at hand, what we need to accomplish, what we need to do to serve our users and our customers and our constituencies. And if that involves a programming language or some type of programmatic tool, then absolutely you should learn it. And I guarantee you, if that is what you need to do, it will be easy and it will be fast, because it will be serving an actual purpose. And you will learn what you need to very, very quickly. But if you're just learning it just to kind of thump your chest and say, I'm a great programmer, you will never, ever get there.
So I think that's really pragmatic. If I were in a place to argue back at you, arguing at me arguing at the question, I might ask whether or not you think learning a programming language or learning any language, let's say French, but doesn't give you a certain culture and a certain way of thinking. And the examples that I think of are things like, I remember when I learned in school Prolog, or when I learned Erlang, both of them make you think very differently about how you can structure a way of talking to a computer or thinking about a system, and I'm just wondering whether there is benefit to program under those conditions, not just under the I have a task, that task will require a language, I should learn the language. Like you get a world with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So definitely, I like the polyglot idea, and I kind of almost assume in a sense that most administrators do this. Like, just like with human languages, you should know just enough about languages to when you hear something to be like, oh, that's Chinese. Oh, that's Japanese. Oh, that's French. That's Greek. You don't need to know what they're saying. You may only know a couple of words, right? But most of us, if you hear somebody say, a Spanish word, like you're like, oh, it's Spanish. I don't know what they're saying, but I know it's Spanish. And same with learning about cultures, right? There are different ways of viewing things, and it can be interesting to unlearn a bit of what you know and think about it from a different point of view. But to get a lot of that, it's really hard. Like, for instance, Lisp is not necessarily a hard language to write in, but wrapping your head around the concepts can be really hard. One for me that I'll just be really blunt because I don't care anymore is for the longest time I did not understand how to use an object-oriented language. The concepts just didn't jive with me because I was writing a lot of C, and I was on the Enlightenment project for a number of years, and we wrote a lot of UI in C. And so we were actually using C in an object-like way, but then when I looked at a truly object-oriented language, I was confused. And I also had written a lot of Perl. This is one of the reasons I have kind of a small disdain for my beloved Perl, is that when I started using objects in Perl, it lets you break the conventions all the time, and so you think you're doing it right, and you're totally not. You're intermingling the two ways of doing it. And so I had a really hard time, and I just didn't understand the purpose beyond what you would see in, Dr. Dobbs' journal or something like that. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of stuff with RESTful APIs where I was now getting back lists. And it was like, oh, each of these elements is an individual data structure. Ah, okay, and they're in a chain. Oh, I can treat each of these like objects, and then the data just knows what to do with itself. It's like the light just came on because I finally had a problem that fit the paradigm. And so it was good that I knew that the paradigm existed, and I kind of I understood what it was about, even though it didn't truly grok at my brain, because then when I saw a problem, it clicked. So there is a certain amount of familiarity, but this is pretty cursory. Like, basically, I would encourage everyone to know how to write "Hello World" in 5 or 6 languages. But don't. When it comes to like, well, then where do I go from there? That's a never-ending thing.
Right. So I understand that the muy es macho thing you're trying to avoid. I get that. Let me ask a quick follow-up to this. So if asking about coding is not is heading you in the wrong direction, is it reasonable to ask whether sysadmins should have some vague familiarity with software engineering practices, at least as on a pragmatic level? Like, for example, we just talked about somebody checking something to GitHub. Sysadmins should learn Git. Sysadmins should learn, like some of the tooling or some of the practices around software engineering, in your opinion?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there are some things that are kind of basic. Like, I'm not sure that using source controls is, in my mind, it's not actually software engineering. Okay. I do think that sometimes we confuse software development practices with software engineering.
You're right. Yeah, right? I misspoke. You're absolutely right.
But I don't mean to push back on you, but I think it's a good distinction to make, because I sometimes have made the mistake of thinking something in software engineering, and it's not. In the same way that as sysadmins, day-to-day administrative tasks is not architecture. Sometimes we say as sysadmins we're architecting something, and it's sort of like, in honesty, we're not, because architecture is kind of a different. It's a slightly different skill set, but it's also, more importantly, a different mentality, right? You need to put yourself in a much broader sort of spectrum when we go to do architecture, which is the same thing you need to do when you do honest-to-goodness sort of software engineering.
And can I presume that the answer you'd give to the question, should people put themselves in that mindset, is if the job depends on it, or if that's what the job you want to do?
Well, I think it's a good thing to introduce yourself to know it when you smell it. I think that when it comes to the mastery component is kind of what I'm saying is that don't artificially try to master something because you won't.
Mm-hmm.
You won't, no matter how hard you try. But definitely have some familiarity with it. And in general, I will say, in general, almost any question of, hey, should we learn X? Like, if you're asking the question, the answer is yes. Because, I mean, look, we work with computers for a living, so,
Right.
Should you know how a CPU works? Yes, you should. Should you know how memory works? Yes, you should. Should you know how to build a computer? Yes. Just about any question you can ask, the answer is yes. Particularly if you're asking it, you clearly have a reason to wonder, in which case the answer is yes. But we don't need to get carried away with I need to be an expert, because there's a reason we all have specialties.
Right.
So there is a mix.
I spend a lot of my time generally looking at what's going on outside so that I know later on when something comes up, hey, I'm going to need to deal with this thing, that it's out there. For example, I've just started a new position part-time. All of a sudden we're talking elk stacks. I've never had any reason to need to do any kind of logging at all, ever. Now all of a sudden I need to do elk stacks. And so having listened to the LUPSA IRC channel for many years and observed other people talking about Splunk and elk and such, I'm a little better prepared. I think this also goes for programming. I am a shell scripter. I'm not a programmer. I haven't written Perl or C in anger in at least over a decade, I would say. But it's still good to know those things exist and are ready to be used. But I think I want to move on now. We've got a little bit of time. I've got about half an hour left or so. In looking at the elk stack, I want your feedback on something, because this actually is something you mentioned in your talk. In looking at this whole elk stack thing, I was looking at the instructions for how to install some of the software for it, in specific, I think it was Elasticsearch. And I come to a part where there's directions to install the init script, and it starts with curl URL pipe sudo. I would like some feedback from you on this concept.
If you're suggesting that, holy crap, that is really insecure to just download something over the internet, probably not even encrypted, and then just pipe it directly into a root exec, is that kind of crazy and stupid? Is that what you're going for?
Well, that's what I'm going for, but I'm asking what when you saw that as instruction.
I think it's brilliant. I do that. I might even go so far to say that I've been doing it long enough that I would be flattered if they stole it from me. So now
I know who to blame.
Yeah, except I don't use sudo because I was a Solaris guy at the time, and I used RBAC like a real boy.
I think he's asking you the trust question to a certain extent.
Yes.
Welcome to land of trust.
I would say it follows the same rules of anything, which is if you do not control the source from which you're drawing, which in that case you would be, then you need to pull it first, analyze it, and if you really can't trust them, like in a case like that, what I would actually do is curl it down, store it in /temp, review it, and then I would cat, file.sh to sudo exec.
Well, actually, it's a little bit more than that. I mean, this is an example of an issue I'm finding in a lot of documentation that maybe, since I spend a lot of time teaching, ethics, and a lot of time just teaching sysadmins, I'm very worried that we're teaching a bunch of people to just randomly trust curl sudo. I mean, this was actually a third-party website that it was telling you to curl from, but not just the curl sudo. I was reading the instructions for how to use, I think it was Git. It might have been Mercurial, might have been Git, and it specifically said in the instructions, create a .NET RC and put your password in it in clear text. And this is stuff that everybody is doing. These are the instructions we're teaching people today. This is not 15 years ago. This is today.
I would rebut that in the sense that we tell people not to do it, hopefully, and they do it anyway. So you're kind of damned if you do it, you're damned if you don't. The important thing is, as educators and as mentors, as coaches or whatnot, is that we tell people, like, when you do this, you at least need to feel bad, right? You need to feel dirty. And if you don't feel a little dirty when you do that, like, then something's sort of ethically wrong with you. It is perfectly acceptable, though, as a solution if you control the endpoint, right? So most of the time when I used that pattern, I actually had a web server that was specifically for that purpose of sharing down assets to machines. And so I had absolute control over both sides. And I would also say that the thing there to remind users that many people have forgotten these days is you shouldn't be installing all your software as root. Like, create a damned user. Like, you can create as many as you want. Go ahead and do that. Use good RBAC technology and good SE Linux has gotten a lot better. I think there's a lot of things we tolerate because we believe that this stuff is too hard. And in a lot of cases, it was true. Like, years ago, it was really bad, and it was arduous and hard, and it caused more problems than it solved, so we just ignored it. But a lot of that stuff has come a long way, and there are more kind of options out there than just using sudo for everything and then sudoing to root. So those are the lessons I think we should be teaching.
How would you suggest we get those lessons out there?
Teach them, blog them. When somebody goes, "Hey, I'm going to do this," be like, "Hey, just consider this other option."
Have you noticed an increase in the percentage of your time that would fall under a category roughly labeled security over time? Do you feel like now you spend more time thinking about that than you ever did? And
I might be a little unusual in that because of my position at Joint, I built the infrastructure, the back-end infrastructure for the cloud and managed operations for the cloud. When we needed, there was a point at which we needed to start looking at compliance in order to attract more customers. We had customers that came in and were like, "I'd love to use you, but you got to be PCI. Love to use you, but you got to be HIPAA." And so I had to go and figure out how to do that, and I did. And so I ended up becoming acting security officer for Joint. I got us through SOC 1. Through PCI DSS v2 and then v3, HIPAA, and a couple of other things that came along. And now at Chef, when I got here, that was one of the things that immediately popped in my head is like, whoa, you guys ought to be SOC 2, and you're not. So guess what? We're bootstrapping a security program, and I guess I'm your acting security officer. Which is a job I hate, by the way, because I'm terrified that something will happen, and I'll be the guy who's sitting in the chair when the music stops. So I'm watching the Ashley Madison information very closely to see what they learn about it. It looks like it's just an insider hack at this point, but yeah, I am thinking about security a lot more. The environment's pretty crappy. What people think is possible and what actually is possible are two different things, and movies haven't helped us, right? There's been a lot of action movies and suspense and drama movies made over the last 20, 30 years that have made people think that stuff is possible that's not, right? So there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of paranoia. One day people think there's too much security, and the next day there's not enough. So yeah, it's a turbulent time, and so I do spend a lot of time thinking about security.
So security is one of those critical things. Management is a critical thing. Your comment about all of a sudden you're going to have to follow compliance reminds me of a question that was raised in our Q&A section, which, to remind our viewers, you can find in the upper right corner, Q&A, or look for the 3x3 grid, and you should find it under there. David Lindes asked, do you have a tools list that's not so much about tools but about management and or collaboration, business books, communication techniques, etc.?
Yeah. I haven't blogged too much about this. So if it weren't for the DevOps thing, I would live in a hole because at least now I have a place to talk about it. I mentioned earlier the Fifth Discipline is a great book that will get you way ahead of your peers super fast. let me pivot it just a little bit and say that we live in a really uniquely awesome time. And we used to have discussions around Lisa time about education. And I feel very differently about education now. Things have really evolved. A couple of years ago, like, we used to be really concerned about university education, right? Whether it was at the undergrad level, the graduate level, PhD level, courses and certificates and all these sorts of things. And, you know, they've never really worked. You have to come up with a really great curriculum, which almost no one could agree on. And then once you do, you got to get people to go to it, which is a hard thing. And it never quite worked, no matter how much we tried. But now there's so many educational resources out there. YouTube is one of the best. Professor Google is fantastic. You got sites like Lynda, Pluralsight. You've now got Coursera, so any course you want to take. The model now, I think, and will be for the foreseeable future, is education on demand. So when you decide that you need to learn something, you can. Because the time that's best, like I was talking about before, learning a programming language, the best time to learn something isn't in advance, when it means nothing to you, where it just goes in one ear and one out the other, and a little bit of that residue sticks, and then you remember one day. But at best, what that does is drives you back to the textbook when you realize you need it. And you still have to go relearn it again. So what's great now is this, for instance, not too long ago, I was thinking about kind of what I was going to be doing in Q2 and how I was going to approach it. And I was thinking about the company strategy and how I fit in that. And there was a little doubt in my mind, like, you know, I haven't, you know, what is strategy? Do I really fully understand business strategy at the high level and how it attaches to me down here? Do I really understand? I think I do, but maybe I don't. So I went and downloaded 2 or 3 strategy, you know, MBA strategy textbooks and flipped through them. Okay, that's good. Went and listened to a bunch of talks by the guys who wrote the books in the 80s and 90s about strategy. And in the course of like 2 days, I knew more about strategy than most MBA students. And it all stuck because I needed it. And you know, so the way that we learn and educate ourselves is totally different, and there's so much out there that really all you need to do is to ask the question.
Okay, so this leads right into the question, since you brought up universities, and I you know, had a university background. Lee is at a university. When you want to find somebody, if you had the opportunity to figure out how to mold somebody that you want working for you, where do we find the sysadmins of today, and how do you expect, you know, before they get to you, what do you want them to have done, even if it's not in university? Like, I'm asking, like, how do we make good sysadmins these days? If it's you know, when you're looking, you know, because if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to work for you. I've done a lot of Googling," is that cool, or is there? Do you need what more do you need, or what would you recommend people do if they want to sort of come up to sort of the more senior level as you're approaching, or enter this stuff? I'm asking a whole bunch of questions simultaneously, but it's like, how do you make a baby sysadmin? Then how do you make someone who can crawl, someone who can walk, and someone who can run as fast as you currently run?
The big thing is a passion to learn, a basic ability to actually do it, and the willingness to follow through. So I've run into this with a couple of people where they can be really junior, but if they come to me and they have a question or they have a challenge that they need to overcome, my head is stupid full of ridiculous pieces of knowledge. Like, I can tell you, I can maybe not tell you everything, but I can definitely point you in the right direction. I can give you tips. I can get you started. I can go. So anybody who has a desire, that's a person I can help, and that's a person I want to be with, right? And you know, there are some things that obviously are easier when somebody's lived through, particularly where a lot of us are, where some of the things that are the way that they are that way for historical reasons. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you haven't been in the industry at least 10 years, there's a very different conversation that happens. Like, for instance, you'll notice that people entering the industry after about 2006 are totally different than most of us who are talking and probably watching this, because they don't remember a time when there wasn't an internet. They don't remember a time before Facebook, or a time before Google, or a time before YouTube. They don't see a computer as a machine that does computation, And that computation can be used for a number of things, particularly when it has a communications channel, right? To them, they think purely in software. Hardware is just a thing that makes it happen, and they could care less how it works because it's commoditized. And they're not wrong, but it makes the conversation a little bit different. So understanding that there are certain things that are the way they are because cloud did not always exist, has its place. And it's something that as we get closer and closer to like 2020, 2030, like will just fade away, and it'll be to the point that those people who came in around 2006 are so mature now that it's not as much an issue. And one of the things, like Todd Underwood makes a good point, that like people should not lose an appreciation for kind of basic computer science and electrical engineering. And I think where that is useful is for those people who don't even know that there's a world there that they're missing out on. That doesn't mean you need to be an expert, but it's certainly a good thing to remember. Oh yeah, algorithms, good thing to know about. The way in which things move between layers of cache, good to know about.
So there's always going to be a need for the tribal elder, but there is a danger that the tribal elder will be the blocking point from growth. I mean, you look in the sciences, and the most dangerous thing against advancement is the person that made the huge critical advancement 20 years before. So how do we balance that? How do we make sure that the knowledge is retained while still moving in what could be considered a forward direction?
You can't. I mean, so if you want to see this play out, anybody who's interested in computer history, one of the best primers on computer history you'll ever get is by Douglas Crockford, who did a series on JavaScript at YouTube. At Yahoo. The videos are on YouTube. And in the very first installment of his JavaScript series, which the name escapes me at the moment, he actually does like an hour-and-a-half long history of computer science. And his point is like, what are the things that went from generation to generation, and what brought things forward, and what held them back? And what stuck across generations was kind of weird and strange, like why we didn't have keyboards for a while, and then when we did. One of them that's my favorite is like, programmers today will tell you, no matter how long they've been programming, will almost tell you religiously, you cannot write a line of code that's longer than 80 characters. Why? Where does that limitation come from? Well, we probably all know because we're old folks, but the reason that exists is that's the number of characters you can put on a punch card. After that punch cards were gone, there was no reason to limit your line. But people continue to do, and they do it today. Most people don't even remember where that came from. So there is generational leap, and every generation will flip-flop back and forth. Like, you see this culturally in terms of kind of spirituality of people. One generation will be extremely spiritual, and then the next generation will have seen that spirituality didn't necessarily work for their parents, so they'll totally fall away. And then the next generation will feel totally spiritually devoid, so they will go back, and there will be this very fundamentalist one where they're like, we need to go back to the roots, to the roots, to the roots, and then you start the cycle over again. And you see the same thing in any industry where there's a need each generation to challenge what came before it, and there's a certain kind of like three-stage rhythm that happens. So some of that's natural, and it's hard to understand. And that's why history tends to be important in understanding. That's one of the things that's fun for us in DevOps. I just finished a business book last night called Re-engineering the Corporation, written in 1993, and it was the book that kicked off business process re-engineering. And a lot of us had heard of business process re-engineering. It's really boring. It has a lot of notation. It's all about re-engineering your processes. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. It seemed neat and kind of handy, but kind of bureaucratic and awful. And I didn't realize until I read the book, in 1993, they needed this because there was 50 years worth of businesses that did everything by hiring a person for every single problem. Companies had grown huge. It took forever to do anything. There were in-baskets and handoffs, and a simple task might take 12 people because they just kept hiring people for every little stupid thing, which meant you had this management layers on top of it. It was just a disaster, right? And there was a point at which that just wasn't sustainable anymore. And business process re-engineering came out of the need to look at the way things were being done and realize that's all stupid, let's do it a different way. So that's what business process reengineering is really for, which means that if you today go and watch a video or read something about business process reengineering, you're like, I don't really think this applies to me. And you know what? It doesn't. It totally doesn't apply to you. It's got some neat tools and tricks and tips, but it's not for you. It was for a previous generation to solve their problem.
So let's do one more of the circle of life questions about the youngins versus the oldins one. One of the things that I've noticed is a much greater percentage of my time involves the letters A, P, and I. You know, in terms of that, like in terms of what a sysadmin means, a sysadmin now spends more time talking to APIs than perhaps they did. And I just want to ask the weird question: who do you think is better at the moment in designing an API for system administration? The new and upcoming people from 2006 who have never lived without APIs, or the village elders, to use Lee's term, who know what a thing should do and have a more rounded understanding of the system entirely? Who would you rather have design your system in APIs?
No, I don't really know, actually. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it goes either way, honestly.
Okay.
I think that definitely the elders, for instance, if they have a deeper appreciation for data structures, like I would think that the person who'd been sort of in computer science-y stuff for a while had a deeper appreciation for data structures and order, but that's not necessarily true. I've known a lot of people kind of from the Sun era that sort of didn't have the same opinions as I did operationally. So I don't think anyone has a lock on that. But I mean, that's also sort of oh, go ahead.
So let me just ask the simple question, and then I think Lee has a follow-up on this. Should sysadmins learn how to design APIs? Is that a skill? Sorry, maybe this goes back. Maybe we already answered this. Is that a skill that you think is 100% like understand APIs, how to build them, how to use them, how to that sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, you have to. I mean, JSON and RESTful APIs. So do I think that you should waste your time with SOAP and WSDLs? No, probably not. Like, would I encourage anyone who doesn't already know XML, would I say, like, you should go and learn what XSL is and how to do transforms and things like that? No, I wouldn't. I'd be like, you should, like it looks like HTML, like, in 5 minutes you can figure that out, like, you're good. But JSON and REST are pretty awesome, pretty basic, pretty simple to get your head around, and extremely powerful and very prolific. So I would say that the things that we have are pretty good, and we should level on them.
Actually, I have two comments.
I was going to add to Lee to talk about that stuff. Go ahead.
My first comment is, in order to design an API, you need people who understand both the what and the why. And so I think we need a combination of the young, energized people who say, hey, we can do this better, and the people who say, this is what we're trying to do. And there should always be the, but why are we trying to do that question? And that can be asked by either the tribal elder or the new upcoming person.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to lock on that.
And to respond to David, I was thinking more in terms of protocols as APIs. So I provide an IMAP server as opposed to I'm going to install your mail reader. I provide a file server that runs known protocols in certain ways, so I don't care anymore what kind of computer you're accessing things from. That's the level of API that David and I were talking about prior to this conversation. So Ben was not prepared for this question very well because he didn't know it was going to be there. So do you see much of a difference between saying, here's your IMAP connection and here's a RESTful API?
No, not fundamentally. No, I don't. In fact, I was thinking about this question in general. The things that make for somebody who can write a really good API, a RESTful API, I should say, is really no different than somebody who's really good at writing a command line interface. Very, very similar. Like, one of the things that matters to us in a command line interface, if you think about it, is like when I run a command with no arguments, I either expect it to do its most basic function, or I expect it to output help. If I give it a dash help or dash dash help, I expect the help. If I write, something invalid, I expect to know that it's invalid and possibly some help. In the same way, like I am a huge fan, and I've gotten in arguments with this. I'm a huge fan of self-documenting APIs. So if I go to an API and just curl / do I get the help, or do I get whatever it normally does and I get its normal output? Is help available? A good RESTful API should be just like a really nice command line interface, and that's one of the reasons I love REST. I mean, it's something that sysadmins can kind of get their heads around and really love.
So I'm having flashbacks to telnetting to the SMTP port.
Yeah. I mean, I did too.
Typing at sendmail.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what you would do. Is you're like, the mail server's not working quite right. What's wrong, right? And I actually had in a notepad, I would have a bunch of like pre-formatted commands for, hello my domain, and you can see where it breaks. And other people would be looking at the logs, scratching your heads, and you're like, no, I found it. I just talked to it.
Yeah, I love being able to do that. So a reminder, we do have a Q&A button in the upper right corner in that grid, and Josh Simon has asked a question that I just want to relay, kind of a future-looking question. Can we get a bibliography, both of books, title and author, and tools URLs after the facts, please? Ben, if you would mind sharing that with Julie, we'll try and get that into the doobly-doo down below for the published version of this when it goes up on YouTube.
Sure.
So David, did you have any other questions you wanted to bring up?
Well, I kind of like the notion that we're sort of ending in API land. I mean, the talk was being a sysadmin is awesome, and I think that we're doing a good job of dancing around parts of the sysadmin world that are awesome. The learning new things, the designing ways to communicate with each other, and that sort of stuff. Is there any other without repeating the talk, is there any other awesomeness from the talk, like why you wake up every morning with a big smile on your face, and besides the kids, that makes you happy that you continue, that this is the field, you did the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, I've never regretted it. I love what I do. I felt a magical joy. The first time I connected to a bulletin board, and instead of getting a menu, I got a prompt, and I typed help, and I ended up getting help for the Bourne shell, and I was mightily confused. And my life has been wonderful and a journey of discovery ever since. And it's changed up stack, but I think one of the points I tried to make in the talk is that what is the system? This is one of the reasons I was really into DevOps, sort of what became DevOps like early on. It was like, what is the system? First the system was a computer, and then the system was a couple computers, and then it was racks of computers, and then it was computers at different sites all working together. And there were times when it looked kind of orderly, and we had things like MPI. And we had cluster frameworks, and systems looked kind of neat and tidy. And then there were times when it didn't. They were distributed and broken and gross, and things changed and grew. And then the cloud sort of came, and that was a much bigger system. But then we go out, and there's this system of processes about how we take care of this, not just that we do it, but how we take care of it, and then taking care of each other. And one of the things that led me to sort of do the managey thing is I never thought I'd be a good manager, or I never considered myself a leader, but I noticed that I got to a point in my career where I was noticing other people didn't understand sysadmins fundamentally how they worked, and they were mean. They didn't understand them, and I was like, I may not know how to be a manager, but I know that I care about these people, and I will take care of them, and I will always do right by them, and I can figure the rest out, I hope, and that kind of worked for me. And so kind of my appreciation for a system now, I feel like a sysadmin, and I'm interested in corporations and like corporate structure. And to me, it's no different than when I started learning 20, 25 years ago in learning how systems work. It's just a bigger system, and it's got more wetware involved. So, right, I think it's a great field that we're in.
Well, so that's part of the DevOps thing. It's the sociological and organizational changes of bringing together parts of an organization. And I remember a long time ago when I first started at the Media Lab, one of the assistant directors there was talking to me about what was I planning on doing in my career. And I said, well, when as you go further up the career, I'm not all that much interested in advancing because you start not being able to build stuff, not type stuff, not to be able to type. And he said, well, you do. You just start doing with people, and less with the computers per se. And I thought that was a fairly wise thing that stayed with me for a long time. And it seems like DevOps does a really good job of expanding out to the human context, that which we've been building as a system.
So I'm going to take this conversation a little bit sideways at this point. So you've been expecting this, Ben, I'm sure. As you know, our previous conversation was with Todd Underwood at Google. And I don't want to make this a battle. I think you both have excellent, valid points. And given the environment I work in, I'm more in the direction you lead than he does. But I would like to know if you have any positive feedback to give Todd before we wrap up this.
When did I say that was negative about Todd? Really? I just want you to restate
him personally. I'm talking about his points.
So here's the thing. Todd's out there and talking. There are lots of people who have lots of opinions who don't go and talk. So I love Todd for doing that. And he's a brisk fellow with a gigantic coffee cup. We now know. I got a lot of love for him. What he says isn't wrong. I don't disagree with probably any point he makes. In that article where I kind of started to riff on him in the talk, where he said system administration was dead, I didn't like that he said that. I didn't like the fact that he talked about how he was geeky and used to have an old computer, and then was like people who are into old geeky computers are old. It was like, dude, a little two-faced there. He made some book recommendations, like people should go and educate themselves. I think that that's also true. Like, go educate yourself. I bought the book that he recommended, and it was great. It was a whole bunch of things that are normally scattered in different textbooks, all in one text. It was great. I think that the thing is that when Todd and some other people like him have said this, it tends to be said in sort of an angry way that's very reactionary. You're like, you just need to learn this. You're just dumb and you're old and you need to do this. And I think it's the tone in which it's said that bothers me. And I'm quite sure he doesn't feel like he's saying that. He probably feels like he's on a mission of mercy to save us from ourselves, and he's probably right. But he's also in a different context, right? Google isn't as wonderful as everyone thinks it is. It's got its warts. But it also is a place that's very supportive and very forward-thinking. There are a lot of us who are in places that are not happy, that are not forward-thinking. I am now. There are times in the past I wasn't, and so I know what that's like. So I think we should keep it positive. We should keep it supportive, and I don't think that statements like such and such is dead, or particularly when speaking of an entire class of people, is productive. There are times when it's funny, but saying that somebody's chosen career path is a dying breed, kind of, it's like, I don't know, dude, that's kind of how I support my family. And maybe you shouldn't just kind of crap all over that for fun.
Well, thank you very much. That's all the time we have. But we always ask 3 questions to our guests at the end of the show. 3.
Just like Monty Python, really.
Must answer me these questions 3.
So are you ready for the closing questions?
Yes, but I want to say that I love Todd. I love you, Todd. You're wonderful.
Question number 1. What was your first computer, speaking of old computers?
It was a 386 DX16 because my parents didn't love me. I didn't have a Commodore, and so I don't get to be one of those people like, I wrote assembly on my Commodore 64. Like, I am so not cool. I did not like computers. I was not into computers. I was into role-playing games and heavy metal until I was in the 9th grade. So, but my 386 with DOS was a piece of crap, but I learned a lot about it, and it had a modem, and then I figured out how to use it, and then everything was awesome.
And the world was opened. Question number 2. Have you ever gotten to press the big red switch, that is the emergency power off or EPO button, in a server room or data center?
No, holy crap. Do you know what that thing does? You shouldn't do that. I protect infrastructure. I protect it with my fucking life. I would never touch that big red button. I'm sorry for cursing, but man, I'm very packed. Don't touch that thing. It's there for good reason. And I build good infrastructures that don't catch on fire. So.
And question number 3. Who is your favorite computer scientist or author?
You know, I gave this a lot of thought. McCarthy was amazing. Alan Kay did so much. But I have to tell you, when I think about the person who made the biggest impact, particularly to us, and must always be remembered, it is hands down Mark Burgess. He has done so much for us, and he's a part of our community. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been very proud of myself for figuring something out and being like, oh, I read this book and I learned all this stuff and it's so cool. And Mark's like just gives me that smile, and I'm like, oh shit, you knew this 20 years ago. And he's like, yeah, I did, but I'm glad you're excited about it. Mark is so incredible, and that guy has a ways to go. Mark is awesome.
So I'm laughing not because I disagree. It's just I didn't expect it, though I could surely see it once you said it.
No, but sometimes when greatness is close to us, we sort of take it for granted, and it's sometimes it's important that we don't, because we remember that we are so lucky to be surrounded by somebody so great. Lisa, I see Toby Odemaker walking. I know I just bashed his last name. He wrote R&D tool. He's walking through the hall and no one's talking to him. I'm just there should be groupies. Anyone who's monitored anything owes this man.
And for future reference,
great people in the Lisa community.
Yeah, and for future reference, if you see Toby walking around, say hello, because he's a totally sweet guy.
He is amazing. He's amazing. He should be a trillionaire, and he's not, because he's an amazing human being.
So I think we could go on with praising people, because there are awesome people at Lisa. But I think you have to get back to your life and et cetera. So I just want to thank you very much for coming on, and it will be great. It will be great to see you and see how you continue to be part of this wonderful community talking about this sort of stuff.
Love the USENIX.
That brings us to the end of this month's Lisa conversation. We hope that you enjoyed it. Thanks to Julie, who is the video you can't really see, the dark spot in there. That's Julie hiding there, helping us run this entire show. We could not do this without her. I really appreciate her support and the support USENIX has given us. I'd like to thank our live listeners, the people who asked questions, and everybody else who's participating. And I would actually like to give a special thanks to Ben Rockwood of Chef for joining us today. Please join us on September 29th when our guest will be Dan Klein. We'll be discussing his Lisa 2014 talk, Push on Green. Check the Lisa Conversations website for details.
Oh, and also be sure to join us at the next USENIX Lisa conference. Watching the recorded videos is fun, but it's nothing compared to being at the conference itself, as everybody, including our esteemed guests, will tell you. The next Lisa is November 8th through the 13th in Washington, D.C. Schedule information is live and published on the Awesome USENIX website, thanks to the Awesome USENIX website people. The registration is open right now, so don't forget to register, because early bird pricing ends on October 15th. We hope to see you there. So this is David Blank-Edelman.
And this is Lee Damon. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month.